The sun was setting over the quiet town of Maplewood, casting long shadows across the streets. The air carried a cool breeze, signaling the end of another uneventful day. Officer Ryan Carter sat in his patrol car, parked near the corner of Elm Street. He sipped from a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, his eyes scanning the road lazily. It was one of those shifts where nothing seemed to happen, just the occasional dog walker or kid riding a bike home from school. But then, something caught his attention. A sleek black Lamborghini glided smoothly down the street, its polished surface reflecting the golden light of the fading sun. The car moved with precision, almost silently, as if it didn't belong in this neighborhood at all. Ryan blinked twice, unsure if he was imagining things. Cars like that weren't common in Maplewood. Most people here drove practical sedans or family-friendly SUVs. This vehicle stood out like a diamond in a pile of rocks. Ryan frowned slightly and leaned forward in his seat. There was something about the way the car was moving that made him uneasy. Maybe it was too smooth, too perfect. Or maybe it was just his instincts kicking in. Either way, he decided to follow it. He turned on the engine of his patrol car and eased into the lane behind the Lamborghini. As he got closer, he noticed the license plate. It looked clean and new, but there was no telling yet if it was legit. He flipped on his dashboard lights, the red and blue flashes cutting through the evening calm. The Lamborghini slowed down immediately and pulled over to the side of the road without hesitation. Ryan felt a mix of satisfaction and curiosity as he parked behind it. Whoever was driving knew how to handle themselves at least. Ryan stepped out of his car, adjusting his belt as he walked toward the driver's side of the Lamborghini. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing a tall man with dark skin and sharp features. He wore a tailored suit that looked expensive but understated. His expression was calm, almost serene, as if being pulled over by the police was an everyday occurrence for him. "Good evening, officer," the man said, his voice steady and polite. "Is there a problem?" Ryan hesitated for a moment before responding. Something about the man's demeanor threw him off balance. He had expected anger, frustration, or maybe even fear. Instead, this guy seemed completely unfazed. Ryan cleared his throat and tried to sound authoritative. "Evening. I noticed you've got a broken taillight. Do you mind stepping out of the vehicle so we can take a look?" The man raised an eyebrow but nodded agreeably. "Of course." He opened the door and stepped out, standing tall beside the gleaming car. Up close, Ryan could see that the man was younger than he'd initially thought, probably in his early 30s. He exuded confidence, the kind that came from knowing your worth. "I'm Marcus Johnson," the man introduced himself, extending a hand. Ryan shook it briefly, noting the firm grip. "And you are?" "Officer Ryan Carter," Ryan replied, automatically. He gestured toward the car. "Nice ride. Where'd you get it?" Marcus smiled faintly as if he'd heard this question before. "It's mine. Bought it last year." Ryan frowned again. The answer sounded rehearsed, almost too perfect. "You sure about that?" he asked, his tone sharper now. "Cars like this don't come cheap. How does someone afford something like this around here?" Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying Ryan with an unreadable expression. "I work hard, officer. Built my own business, that's how I afford things." Ryan wasn't convinced. He gestured for Marcus to stay put while he returned to his patrol car to run the plates. As he typed the information into the system, his mind raced. Everything about this situation felt off. The car, the suit, the calm demeanor, it all added up to something that didn't quite fit. While Ryan checked the details, Marcus stood patiently by his car, leaning casually against the doorframe. He glanced around at the growing number of curious onlookers who had stopped to watch the scene unfold. Some were neighbors walking their dogs. Others were teenagers on bikes whispering to each other. Among them was Lisa Harper, a local journalist, who had been driving home when she spotted the commotion. She parked her car a short distance away and grabbed her phone, starting to record discreet newborn puppies. As Officer Ryan Carter waited for the results of the license plate check, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about Marcus Johnson didn't add up. The man's calm demeanor and polished appearance only deepened Ryan's suspicions. He glanced back at Marcus, who stood by his Lamborghini with an air of quiet confidence. Ryan wasn't sure whether to admire the man's composure or be more suspicious because of it. The license plate came back clean. No outstanding tickets, no reports of theft. Ryan frowned as he read the details on his screen. Everything seemed to be in order. But that didn't stop him from digging deeper. He stepped out of his patrol car again and approached Marcus, his notebook in hand. "So, Mr. Johnson," he began, his tone firmer this time, "where are you coming from tonight?" Marcus raised an eyebrow but answered politely, "I was visiting a friend in the next town over. Just heading home now." Ryan nodded, jotting down the response. "And where exactly do you live?" "Maplewood Heights," Marcus replied without hesitation. Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. Maplewood Heights was one of the nicer neighborhoods in town, filled with spacious homes and tree-lined streets. It wasn't the kind of place he would have expected someone like Marcus to live, someone who looked so out of place driving a luxury car. Ryan pressed on. "What do you do for work, Mr. Johnson?" "I'm an entrepreneur," Marcus said simply. "I run a tech company." Ryan let out a short laugh, though it lacked humor. "A tech company? Huh? What kind of tech?" Marcus hesitated for just a moment, as if deciding how much to share. "Artificial intelligence. We develop software that helps businesses automate tasks and improve efficiency." Ryan crossed his arms over his chest, skepticism written all over his face. "Sounds fancy. And profitable, I'm guessing." "It has its moments," Marcus admitted with a small smile. "But it's also a lot of hard work." Ryan wasn't satisfied. Something about Marcus's answers felt rehearsed, too smooth. He glanced around at the growing crowd of onlookers. Some were whispering to each other while others were openly staring. Among them was Lisa Harper, still recording everything on her phone. Ryan noticed her presence and felt a flicker of irritation. This wasn't the kind of attention he wanted during a routine traffic stop. "Listen, Mr. Johnson," Ryan said, lowering his voice slightly as he leaned closer. "I've got to be honest with you. A guy like you, driving a car like this, it raises some questions. You understand what I'm saying?" Marcus's expression hardened ever so slightly, though he kept his tone even. "Are you asking me if I earned this car, officer?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably but didn't back down. "Let's just say it's not every day I see someone from around here cruising around in a Lamborghini. People tend to notice things like that." Marcus sighed softly, shaking his head. "Officer Carter, I appreciate your dedication to your job, but I hope you realize that owning a nice car doesn't make me guilty of anything." Before Ryan could respond, Lisa stepped forward, her phone still recording. "Excuse me, officer," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Can you explain why you pulled this man over? From what I can see, there doesn't appear to be any issue with his vehicle." Ryan turned to her, his jaw tightening. "Ma'am, this is a police matter. I'd appreciate it if you stayed out of it." Lisa raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "Actually, it becomes a public matter when citizens feel their rights are being violated. So I'll ask again, why did you pull him over?" Ryan clenched his fists briefly before forcing himself to relax. He knew arguing with her wouldn't help the situation. Instead, he turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Johnson, I'm going to need to see some proof of ownership for this vehicle. Can you provide that?" Marcus nodded and reached into the glove compartment of his car. He pulled out a folder containing the registration papers and handed them to Ryan. As Ryan flipped through the documents, he found everything in order. Proof of purchase, insurance information, even a receipt from the dealership. There was no denying that the car belonged to Marcus. Still, Ryan wasn't ready to let it go. "This is quite the investment," he remarked, holding up the papers. "How long have you owned this company of yours?" 5 years, Marcus replied. "It started small, but we've grown steadily since then." Ryan nodded slowly, trying to process the information. On paper, everything checked out. Marcus seemed to be exactly who he claimed to be, a successful businessman with the means to afford a luxury car. But Ryan's gut told him otherwise. Maybe it was the way Marcus carried himself, Or maybe it was the nagging voice in the back of his mind telling him not to trust appearances. "You know," Ryan said after a pause, "people sometimes get into trouble for showing off wealth they don't actually have. Loans, scams, stolen property. It happens more often than you'd think." Marcus's patience was starting to wear thin. "Officer, I assure you, my success is legitimate. If you'd like, I can provide references or contact information for my business partners." Ryan hesitated, unsure how to proceed. He didn't want to come across as unreasonable, but he also didn't want to let Marcus go without being absolutely certain of his story. The last thing he needed was for this to blow up in his face later. Just then, a young boy from the crowd shouted, "Why are you picking on him? He didn't do anything wrong." The comment drew murmurs of agreement from the onlookers. Ryan glanced around, feeling the weight of their stares. For the first time, he began to doubt whether he was handling the situation correctly. Marcus noticed the shift in Ryan's demeanor and decided to take advantage of it. "Officer Carter," he said calmly, "I understand you're just doing your job, but I hope you can see that I'm not a threat. I'm a resident of this town, same as anyone else. All I want is to get home to my family." Ryan looked at Marcus, for a long moment searching for any sign of deception, but all he saw was sincerity. Reluctantly, he handed the papers back. "Fine, Mr. Johnson. You're free to go. Just be careful out there, all right?" Marcus nodded and climbed back into his car. As he drove away, the crowd dispersed, leaving Ryan standing alone on the side of the road. Lisa lingered for a moment longer, giving him a pointed look before walking back to her car. Ryan returned to his patrol vehicle, feeling unsettled. Something about the encounter gnawed at him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Little did he know this was only the beginning of a much bigger story, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew. The next morning, Officer Ryan Carter sat at his desk in the Maplewood Police Department, staring blankly at a pile of paperwork. His mind kept drifting back to the traffic stop from the night before. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a mistake. The calm confidence of Marcus Johnson, the clean documentation for the Lamborghini, the whispers of the onlookers, it all replayed in his head like a loop he couldn't escape. Ryan glanced up as his partner, Officer Greg Mitchell, walked into the room carrying a cup of coffee. "Morning," Greg said casually, dropping into the chair across from Ryan. "You look like you didn't sleep much." Ryan sighed and rubbed his temples. "I've been thinking about that guy I pulled over last night. Something about it just feels off." Greg raised an eyebrow. "Off how? Did he break any laws?" "No, not really," Ryan admitted. "But there's something about him. I don't know, his car, his suit, his whole attitude. It's like he doesn't belong here." Greg chuckled softly. "Maybe he doesn't. People can live wherever they want these days. Doesn't mean they're up to something." Ryan frowned. "Yeah, but why does it feel like I'm missing something, like there's more to the story?" Before Greg could respond, their Sergeant Mike Dawson stepped into the room. He held a tablet in one hand and looked unusually serious. "Carter, can I see you in my office?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ryan exchanged a quick glance with Greg before following Sergeant Dawson down the hall. As soon as they were inside the office, Dawson closed the door and turned to face Ryan. "We've got a situation," he said bluntly. "That traffic stop you did last night, it's gone viral." Ryan's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, gone viral?" Dawson handed him the tablet. On the screen was a video posted by Lisa Harper, the journalist who had recorded the encounter. The clip showed Ryan questioning Marcus, his tone skeptical and probing. Comments poured in beneath the video, many accusing Ryan of racial profiling. Some called for his suspension or even termination. "This is bad, Carter," Dawson said, shaking his head. "People are calling us out for discrimination. The mayor's already breathing down my neck about this." Ryan stared at the screen, his hands trembling slightly. "But I wasn't trying to profile him, I was just doing my job." "I believe you," Dawson replied, though his expression remained grim. "But perception matters, and right now, the public thinks we mishandled this whole thing." Ryan sank into a chair, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. What am I supposed to do? For starters, you need to reach out to Mr. Johnson and apologize, Dawson said, firmly. Publicly, if possible. We need to show that we're taking this seriously. Ryan nodded reluctantly. Okay, I'll try. Later that day, Ryan found himself standing outside Marcus Johnson's house in Maplewood Heights. The neighborhood was exactly as he'd imagined. Quiet streets lined with well-maintained homes and manicured lawns. Marcus's house stood out. Even here, a modern design with large windows and a sleek front door. Ryan hesitated for a moment before ringing the bell. The door opened almost immediately, revealing Marcus. He looked surprised to see Ryan, but quickly masked it with a polite smile. "Officer Carter," he said. "To what do I owe the visit?" Ryan cleared his throat, feeling awkward. "Mr. Johnson, I wanted to apologize for last night. I realize now that I may have come across as overly suspicious." Marcus studied him for a moment before stepping aside. "Come in." Inside, the house was just as impressive as the exterior. The living room was spacious and tastefully decorated, with artwork hanging on the walls and expensive furniture arranged neatly. Marcus gestured for Ryan to sit on the couch while he took a seat across from him. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said after a moment. "Not many people would have the courage to do that." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "I know I messed up. I let my assumptions get the better of me, and that's not fair to you." Marcus nodded slowly. "Assumptions can be dangerous, but I understand where you're coming from. People see someone like me driving a luxury car, and they jump to conclusions." Ryan winced at the directness of the statement. "Yeah, I guess I did." There was a brief silence before Marcus spoke again. "Do you want to know the truth, Officer Carter? About why I drive that car, why I dress the way I do?" Ryan looked up, surprised. "If you're willing to share it." Marcus leaned back, in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "When I first started my company, Neuralink, I faced a lot of doubt. Investors didn't take me seriously because of my age, my background, the color of my skin. Every step forward felt like a battle. But I refused to let anyone define me. I worked harder than anyone else, proved myself time and time again. That car? It's not just a status symbol. It's a reminder of how far I've come." Ryan listened intently, realizing how little he actually knew about the man sitting across from him. "I had no idea," he admitted quietly. "And now," Marcus continued, "because of moments like last night, I still have to fight those same battles. People assume I don't deserve what I have, that I must have taken shortcuts or broken rules. But I haven't. I earned every bit of it." Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, truly." Marcus gave him a small, understanding smile. "Apology accepted. But let me ask you this. What are you going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again?" Ryan paused, considering the question. "I don't know yet, but I want to learn. I want to do better." Marcus nodded approvingly. "That's a start." As Ryan left the house a short while later, he felt a strange mix of emotions: guilt, relief, determination. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time he felt like he might actually be able to change. All it took was one honest conversation and a willingness to listen. The days following Ryan's visit to Marcus Johnson's house were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. Word of the apology spread quickly, thanks in part to Lisa Harper's follow-up article about the meeting. She described it as a rare moment of accountability and praised both men for their willingness to engage in dialogue. The public response was mixed. Some applauded Ryan for owning up to his mistake, while others remained skeptical, calling the gesture too little, too late. For Ryan, the pressure mounted. His colleagues at the police department gave him a wide berth, unsure how to approach him without appearing critical or supportive. Meanwhile, calls poured into the station from community members demanding answers. The mayor held a press conference, promising reforms within the department, but offering few specifics. Amid all the chaos, Ryan found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about his role as an officer. and about himself. Determined to make amends, Ryan decided to take action. He reached out to Lisa Harper, hoping to gain insight into how he could rebuild trust with the community. To his surprise, she agreed to meet him at a small cafe downtown. When Ryan arrived, Lisa was already seated at a corner table, sipping on a cup of tea. Her expression softened slightly when she saw him approaching. "Thanks for coming," Ryan said, sliding into the chair across from her. "I know we didn't exactly start off on the right foot." Lisa nodded, setting her teacup down. "No, we didn't. But I'm here because I think you're trying to do the right thing now. That counts for something." Ryan exhaled slowly, relieved by her words. "Look, I messed up. I let my biases get in the way, and I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I want to learn. What can I do to help fix this?" Lisa leaned forward, her tone thoughtful. "It's not just about fixing one situation. It's about changing the system that allows these situations to happen in the first place. People are tired of feeling targeted, of being treated like criminals simply because of how they look or what they own. You have a platform as an officer. Use it." Ryan frowned, considering her advice. "How?" "Start by listening," Lisa replied. "Go to community meetings. Talk to people who've been affected by racial profiling. Learn their stories. And then, push for real change within your department. Better training, stricter accountability, transparency. These things won't happen overnight, but they're necessary." Ryan nodded, absorbing her words. "Okay, I'll start there." True to his word, Ryan began attending local community forums. At first, he felt out of place, sitting quietly in the back of the room while residents voiced their frustrations. Many spoke passionately about experiences with law enforcement. Traffic stops gone wrong, unwarranted searches, dismissive attitudes. Each story hit Ryan like a punch to the gut, forcing him to confront the reality of what so many people faced daily. One evening, during a particularly heated discussion, a woman named Angela stood up to speak. Her voice trembled with emotion as she recounted the time her teenage son had been pulled over for no reason other than driving a nice car. "He came home crying that night," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He told me he felt like he'd never be seen as anything more than a stereotype. How do you explain that to a child? How do you tell him the world will always see him as guilty until proven innocent?" Ryan sat frozen, guilt washing over him. He realized that Marcus's experience wasn't unique. It was part of a larger pattern, one he had unwittingly contributed to. After the meeting ended, he approached Angela cautiously. "Ma'am," he began, his voice soft. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened to your son and for the ways I've failed this community." Angela studied him for a long moment before nodding. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. Don't stop here, keep going." Encouraged by her words, Ryan threw himself into learning more about systemic issues within policing. He attended workshops on implicit bias, read books about race and inequality, and sought guidance from mentors outside the department. Slowly but surely, he began to see the world through a different lens, one that acknowledged privilege, prejudice, and the power dynamics at play in every interaction. Meanwhile, Marcus Johnson continued to make headlines, not just for his business success, but also for his advocacy work. He partnered with local organizations to launch initiatives aimed at bridging the gap between law enforcement and marginalized communities. One program focused on providing scholarships for underprivileged youth interested in technology careers. Another offered free coding classes to kids in underserved neighborhoods. When Ryan heard about Marcus's efforts, he reached out again, this time asking if he could contribute in some way. Marcus agreed, inviting Ryan to speak at a panel discussion hosted by Neuralink. The event brought together police officers, activists, educators, and community leaders to discuss ways to foster mutual understanding and respect. Standing behind the podium on the day of the event, Ryan felt nervous but resolute. He shared his story openly, the mistakes he'd made, the lessons he'd learned, and the steps he was taking to grow. By the end of his speech, the audience erupted in applause, moved by his honesty and vulnerability. Afterward, Marcus approached him with a proud smile. "You've come a long way, Officer Carter." Ryan chuckled nervously. "Still got a long way to go, but I'm committed to getting there." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "That's all anyone can ask for." As the evening drew to a close, Ryan reflected on how far he'd come since that fateful traffic stop. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful that change was possible, and that he could be part of it. Months passed, and the ripple effects of Ryan Carter's journey began to spread throughout Maplewood. The small steps he had taken, attending community meetings, speaking at events, and pushing for reforms within the police department, started to gain momentum. At first, progress was slow, almost imperceptible, but as more people joined the conversation, change became inevitable. Ryan worked closely with Sergeant Mike Dawson to introduce new training programs for officers in the department. These weren't just generic workshops on diversity. They were deeply personal sessions where officers shared their own experiences and listened to stories from members of the community. Some resisted at first, uncomfortable with the idea of confronting their biases head-on, but Ryan persisted, leading by example and showing that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. One evening, during one of these training sessions, an older officer named Carl spoke up. He had been skeptical of the changes at first, often grumbling about political correctness under his breath. But that night something shifted. "I've been doing this job for over 20 years, Carl admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "And I know I've made mistakes. I've stopped people because of how they looked or what neighborhood they were in. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, I see things differently." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed his words. Ryan nodded encouragingly. "It's not easy to admit that," he said, "but recognizing it is the first step toward doing better." Carl's confession opened the floodgates. Other officers began sharing their own struggles. The pressure to meet quotas, the fear of making the wrong call, the weight of carrying a badge in a world that often viewed them as enemies. For the first time, many felt heard, understood, and supported. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Outside the police department, Marcus Johnson continued to play a pivotal role in driving change. His advocacy work extended beyond technology and education. He became a vocal supporter of criminal justice reform, partnering with local leaders to push for policy changes at the city and state levels. One initiative focused on creating independent oversight committees to review cases of alleged misconduct by law enforcement. Another aimed to provide mental health resources for both officers and residents, recognizing the toll that systemic issues took on everyone involved. Marcus also remained committed to fostering dialogue between the police and the community. He organized monthly roundtable discussions where officers and civilians could come together in a neutral space to talk openly about their concerns and hopes for the future. These meetings weren't always easy. There were moments of tension, frustration, and even anger, but they were honest. And honesty, Marcus believed, was the foundation of trust. At one such meeting, Lisa Harper sat beside Ryan, observing the exchange with a mix of curiosity and optimism. She had covered countless stories about conflict and division, but this felt different. There was a genuine effort to understand each other, to find common ground. When the discussion turned to the topic of accountability, Lisa raised her hand to speak. "I used to think the only way to hold officers accountable was through punishment," she said, "but now I realize that accountability can also mean growth. It means admitting when you're wrong and working to do better. That's what real accountability looks like." Her words resonated with everyone in the room, including Ryan. He realized that accountability wasn't just about facing consequences. It was about taking responsibility and using that awareness to create positive change. It was a lesson he carried with him every day, both in his personal life and in his work. As the months went by, Maplewood began to transform. Small victories accumulated, building a sense of hope and possibility. A high school student who had attended one of Marcus's coding classes, won a national competition, inspiring others to pursue careers in tech. A young mother whose son had been unfairly targeted by police found solace in a support group created by activists and officers, working together. Even the local news coverage shifted, highlighting stories of collaboration and progress rather than conflict. Ryan noticed the difference in his interactions with residents. People still approached him with caution, but there was less hostility, more openness. During a routine patrol one afternoon, he stopped at a corner store to grab a bottle of water. The owner, a man named Jamal who had previously avoided eye contact with officers, greeted him warmly. "Officer Carter," Jamal said with a smile. "How's it going?" Ryan returned the smile, surprised by the warmth in Jamal's tone. "Good, thanks. How about you?" Jamal shrugged. "Can't complain. Things are getting better around here. Slowly, but they're getting better." Ryan nodded, feeling a swell of pride. "That's good to hear. If there's ever anything you need, don't hesitate to reach out." Jamal chuckled, softly. "I'll keep that in mind." Moments like these reminded Ryan why he had chosen to become a police officer in the first place: to serve and protect. Somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of that purpose, letting cynicism and bias cloud his judgment. But now, he was rediscovering it, piece by piece. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Not everyone was ready to embrace change. Some officers dug their heels in, resisting new policies and clinging to old ways of thinking. Residents, too, were divided. Some welcomed the efforts to improve relations, while others remained distrustful, convinced that nothing would truly change. Ryan understood their skepticism. Trust once broken took time to rebuild, but he refused to give up. Every setback was an opportunity to learn, to adapt, and to push forward. He leaned on Marcus, Lisa, and others in the community for guidance, grateful for their unwavering support. One evening, as Ryan walked home after a long shift, he paused at the edge of Elm Street, the same spot where he had pulled over Marcus Johnson all those months ago. The streetlights cast soft glows on the pavement, illuminating the quiet neighborhood. For a moment, he closed his eyes, reflecting on how far he and Maplewood had come. When he opened them again, he saw Marcus walking toward him, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. "Evening, Officer Carter," Marcus said with a grin. "Taking a stroll?" Ryan laughed softly. "Just thinking." Marcus joined him at the curb, gazing down the empty street. "About what?" "About how much has changed," Ryan replied. "And how much still needs to." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Change is never easy, but it's worth fighting for." Ryan smiled, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "Yeah, it is." Together they stood in silence for a moment, watching. As the lights flickered in the distance, the road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time it felt full of promise. The changes in Maplewood didn't happen overnight, but over time they began to take root. The town wasn't perfect, far from it, but the seeds of progress had been planted, and they were growing. Officer Ryan Carter became a symbol of that growth, not because he was faultless, but because he was willing to admit his mistakes and work toward something better. Ryan's efforts within the police department gained recognition beyond Maplewood. Word spread about the reforms he and Sergeant Mike Dawson had implemented, inspiring other departments to follow suit. A nearby city invited Ryan to speak at a conference on community policing, where he shared his journey openly and honestly. "It's not about being perfect," he told the audience. "It's about being willing to listen, to learn, and to grow. That's how we build trust." The speech earned him applause, but more importantly, it sparked conversations. Officers from across the region reached out to Ryan, asking for advice on how to start similar programs in their own communities. At first, Ryan hesitated. He didn't see himself as an expert, but Marcus encouraged him to embrace the role. "You've walked the path," Marcus said. "That makes you uniquely qualified to guide others." With Marcus's support, Ryan began mentoring officers who wanted to make a difference. They met regularly, sharing strategies, discussing challenges, and brainstorming solutions. Slowly but surely, a network of like-minded individuals formed, united by a common goal: to create a fairer, more compassionate system. Meanwhile, Marcus Johnson continued to thrive both personally and professionally. Neuralink expanded its reach, partnering with schools and organizations to provide resources for underserved communities. The company's success brought attention from national media outlets, which highlighted Marcus not just as a tech innovator, but also as a leader in social change. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Marcus sat on his couch scrolling through news articles. One headline caught his eye: "From traffic stop to transformation, how one encounter changed a town." The article chronicled the events that had unfolded in Maplewood, focusing on Ryan's apology, the community's response, and the subsequent reforms. As Marcus read, he felt a deep sense of pride, not just for himself, but for everyone who had played a part in shaping the town's future. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was Lisa Harper calling. "Hey, Marcus," she said when he answered. "Did you see the article?" "I did," Marcus replied. "It's well written. You should be proud." Lisa laughed softly. "I can't take all the credit. This story belongs to the people of Maplewood, including you." Marcus smiled. "And Ryan? Don't forget him." "Of course not," Lisa said. "He's come a long way since that night. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect when I first met him, but he's proven me wrong. He's genuine." "That's the thing about growth," Marcus said thoughtfully. "It doesn't happen in a straight line. There are twists and turns, setbacks and breakthroughs. But if you stay committed, you can get there." Lisa agreed. "Speaking of growth, have you heard about the new policy proposal? It's based on some of the ideas you've been advocating for." Marcus nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Yeah, I've been working with the mayor's office on it. We're close to finalizing the details." "Well, count me in if you need any help," Lisa said. "This is too important to let slip through the cracks." "You're already helping," Marcus replied. "Your reporting has kept the pressure on. Without it, none of this would have happened." They ended the call on a hopeful note, each feeling grateful for the roles they had played in bringing about change. For Marcus, the journey was far from over, but he knew that every step forward mattered. Back in Maplewood, life went on as usual, but with noticeable improvements. Residents reported feeling safer and more respected by law enforcement. Traffic stops became less frequent and more transparent, with officers explaining their reasoning clearly and courteously. Community events drew larger crowds as people grew more comfortable interacting with officers outside of tense situations. Ryan noticed the shift during his patrols. People waved at him from porches, stopped to chat at the park, or thanked him for his efforts. These small gestures meant the world to him, reinforcing his belief that change was possible. Still, he remained vigilant, knowing that maintaining trust required constant effort. One Saturday morning, Ryan attended a neighborhood cleanup event organized by local activists. Volunteers of all ages gathered to pick up trash, plant trees, and beautify public spaces. As he worked alongside them, Ryan struck up a conversation with a teenage boy named Jamal, who reminded him of Marcus when he was younger. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Ryan asked casually. Jamal shrugged. "I don't know yet. Maybe a scientist or something." Ryan smiled. "That's a great goal. You should check out some of the programs Mr. Johnson runs. He's doing amazing work with kids like you." Jamal's eyes lit up. "Really? Do you think he'd let me join?" "I'm sure he would," Ryan replied. "Let me know if you need help getting started." Jamal grinned, nodding enthusiastically. Watching the boy walk away, Ryan felt a surge of optimism. Moments like these reminded him why the hard work was worth it. As the months turned into years, Maplewood became a model for other towns striving to bridge divides between law enforcement and marginalized communities. The partnership between Ryan and Marcus served as proof that collaboration could overcome even the deepest mistrust. Their bond, forged in the crucible of conflict, grew stronger with time. One evening, the two men met at a cafe near Elm Street, the same street where their paths had first crossed. Over coffee, they reflected on how far they'd come. "I never imagined I'd end up here," Ryan admitted, stirring his cup absently. "When I pulled you over that night, I thought I was just doing my job. I had no idea it would lead to all this."